There is a podcast that lies between the imagination of two simple-minded earthlings. Travel with these two longtime friends, Jimbo and 80s E, as they attempt to explore the fifth dimension. Follow along with them as they take the key and unlock the door to the vast space between shadow and substance. This podcast is one of trivia, of insight, and of sounds and ideas from one of the greatest television shows ever produced. You are embarking on a timeless journey. There is your signpost up ahead. You are entering the tragedy of cinema's Twilight Zone.
Suspended in time and space for a moment, your introduction to Miss Janet Tyler, who lives in a very private world of darkness, a universe whose dimensions are the size, thickness, length of the swath of bandages that cover her face. In a moment, we'll go back into this room, and also in a moment, we'll look under those bandages, keeping in mind, of course, that we're not to be surprised by what we see, because this isn't just a hospital, and this patient 307 is not just a woman. This happens to be the Twilight Zone, and Miss Janet Tyler, with you, is about to enter it.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Tragedy of Cinema's Twilight Zone series. I'm your host, Jimbo, and joined today once again from the Fifth Dimension.
Greetings from the Fifth Dimension, everyone. Excited to get on this episode, Season 2, Episode number 6, Eye of the Beholder.
Yes, but who are you?
Who am I? I'm 80s E. Always
okay.
Coming from the Fifth Dimension to you all. Hopefully you're all having a good day.
Right. Today is episode is probably one of the most famous Twilight Zone episodes of all time. It is personally one of my favorites of all time. So definitely when we do our year-end review or even season review, this is definitely going to be in one of the upper echelon episodes that I rank. Because this is one that has stuck with me since I was a kid. First time seeing it. And those of you that are of an older generation, there used to be a Twilight Zone marathon that used to run either on Labor Day or Memorial Day or maybe both. I can't remember. But I remember it would be just back to back to back for like 24 hours of these episodes. And I was at my grandma's. I would just be hooked watching these.
Yep.
So
I remember.
So 80s, this is going to be a heavy episode. So why don't we go ahead and get started?
Yeah, before we do that, I wanted to address a question that you asked previously. I don't remember what episode it was. It might have been 2 or 3 episodes ago, but you had raised the question because, in light of the fact that Rod Serling is now doing all of his narration on screen in Season 2. That was kind of something that was new for Season 2. You had asked the question whether he paid himself or how he was compensated for those on-screen appearances. I don't have the direct answer to that question, but I do have this, and I'll just read it. And this is from CelebrityNetWorth.com. It says, in 1959, Serling's best-known work, The Twilight Zone, aired on CBS. It was a 5-hour series which he used his creativity to talk about things like racism, which we'll touch on that today, actually, in this episode, sexism, and other social problems. CBS purchased the rights and ownership of The Twilight Zone in 1966. Now, get this, for $285,000. They purchased the rights. Now, keep in mind, this is the internet. There could be some discrepancies, but I'm going on what CelebrityNetWorth.com says. This equates to about $2.3 million today. Mr. Serling also gave up his rights to royalties from reruns with the sale. Yeah, I was like, I don't know. That might not have been the greatest deal, but apparently it was good for him in 1966, and so, yeah, that's the best I could come up with as far as compensation for Mr. Rod Serling. But anyway, all told, I think Celebrity Net Worth said his net worth was around $10 million. So I don't know what that equates to in today's dollars. But there you go. That's my best shot at answering your question.
Good job. Good job.
So, do you want me to just go ahead and launch in here to the Eye?
Launch on in.
Okay.
Buddy.
The Eye of the Beholder, The Twilight Zone, Season 2, Episode number 6. This was directed by Douglas Hayes, and it was written by Rod Serling. So, Rod is back to writing these teleplays. It was produced by Buck Houghton. And, of course, the featured music, you should be familiar with this name. His name is Bernard Herrmann. Originally broadcast on November the 11th, so Veterans Day 1960. The total production cost for this episode was $48,599, which equates in our dollars to $487,316, about a 902% increase as far as inflation goes. And one other thing that I wanted to touch on just as far as an introduction goes was, and I got this from phrases.org, actually phrases.org in the UK. The phrase or the theme, well, I guess it would be the phrase beauty is in the eye of the beholder. This saying first appeared in the 3rd century, but it was originally in Greek. It was actually the 3rd century BC, and it did not appear in English in its current form in print until the 19th century. The person who is widely credited with coining the saying in its current form is Margaret Wolfe Hungerford, who wrote many books under the pseudonym of the Duchess, and it's first found in her work called Molly Bawn, B-A-W-N, and it was in 1878. There's a line, "Beauty is in the eye of the beholder," which is the earliest citation that we can find for that actual full phrase. Now, there were other authors who used it, like William Shakespeare used it in a poem. I forget what century, was that like the 16th or 1500s that he used it. And there are other like forms that it was used earlier than the 19th century, but that was actually the first citation. This, the Duchess, if you will, she used it, the full phrase, "Beauty is in the eye of the beholder." And I'm sure in our trivia we'll talk about the title of this episode, "Eye of the Beholder." Well, the beauty is obviously dropped from the title, but they actually had to adjust the title of the episode when it went through reruns because of some litigation problems. But I don't know if Jimbo has that in his notes or not. But
yeah, it was originally called the Eye of the Beholder,
right.
But there was a lawsuit because some person. Let me see if I can find it real quick. So here it is. Because originally the preceded the title until television producer Stuart Reynolds threatened to sue Rod Sterling for the use of the name because at the time he was selling an educational film of the same name to public schools. Reruns following the initial broadcast featured the title screen, "The Private World of Darkness." So they did change the actual name.
Right. I'm glad you had that information there. I remember reading about it or talking about it with someone, but yeah. So, Jimbo, you want to go ahead and take the cast next?
Sure, Eric. Let me unwrap this cast for you, if you will.
There you go. Nice.
So, we have Maxine Stewart, who played Janet Tyler under the bandages. So, this is the first time that we see the main character basically being played by two different people. Both with Janet Taylor, this is the one that's actually under the bandages before they unwrap the face. She was probably most famous for being on Young and the Restless as Margaret. For all of you soap opera fans, I'm sure Eric can attest to.
Oh yeah, I love the soap operas
of the 80s, 90s. Then you had William D. Gordon, who was the doctor. He was in a lot of TV shows, most notably The Fugitive, Chips, Bonanza, a lot of different ones. Then you have Jennifer Howard as Janet's nurse. She was in lots and lots of Perry Mason as well as several other TV shows. You have George Keymis, who was basically the leader, the fearless leader. That's on the television screen. He was in Zorro in 1958 as Roberto. You had Joanna Hayes, who was the reception nurse. She was also in a bunch of TV shows such as Dragnet, Thriller, a couple others. You had Edson Stroll as Walter Smith. He was in Snow White and the Three Stooges from 1961, as well as McKell's Navy joins the Air Force, where he played Virgil Edwards in 1965. And yes, probably the most famous actress on this episode is Donna Douglas, who plays Janet Tyler when she's revealed, better known for Ellie Mae Clampett of the Beverly Hillbillies fame, and the movie Frankie and Johnny, the Elvis Presley movie where she played Frankie.
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, we have the great Rod Serling playing himself as the narrator and the host.
Alrighty. I got a question for you now. Out of all of those names, who do you think has the most credits out of all of those actors and actresses? Also, it's worth...
You know what?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but also it's also worth pointing out that Joanna Hayes was the wife of Douglas Hayes, the director, so that's one little tidbit.
If I had to guess, there's two that I would say just because I have the star meter rankings on my paper here. But if I was going to say somebody, I would say Maxine Stewart, the lady under the bandages.
Close. She's number 2.
I know. I was reading something where she said that they asked her, were you upset that you didn't get be the person outside of the bandages too? And she's like, no. She's like, I could go in there and I could act under these bandages, she said, and I didn't have to look at anybody. I was basically by myself just acting and filling. She said, but I guess, beauty is beauty. They wanted somebody beauty. And she said, I don't really care about that. So I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah. But if I have to guess, I'm going to have to say Joanna Hayes.
No, not Joanna Hayes. It was actually George Camus, the leader, on the big TV screen there. He had 155. You were right. With Maxine Stewart had 125. So, yeah, Joanna Hayes, though, oddly enough, you know what threw me? It was William Gordon, the doctor, was just in A Nervous Man in a $4 Room. He was George in Nervous Man in a $4 Room, right. And he was just the doctor's voice in this episode, which... and I got another... Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll get to it. Let me go on with the plot, or we'll never get through this. This is just... juicy. It's got so much good stuff in it. The plot goes as such. Janet Tyler is in the hospital having undergone treatment to make her look normal. I'll put normal in quotations. It's her 11th trip to the hospital for treatment, and she is desperate to look like everyone else. Some of her earliest childhood memories are of people looking away, horrified by her appearance. Her bandages will soon come off, and she has only one hope, and that is her last treatment will have done the trick. If not, her doctor has told her she will be segregated with a colony of similar-looking people. All that to say that truth is truly in the eye of the beholder. So there's your plot line. Jimbo, let's go ahead and launch in. Unless you have any other preliminary comments or trivia or something that comes to mind.
I think as we go along with some of the dialogue of this episode, you're going to see a deeper tone of things that Serling was trying to hint at. Even though this is a Twilight Zone episode, I think you can pretty much see some of the real-life tie-ins to this episode, especially at what was happening at the time in America with racial inequality and segregation. I think it's pretty obvious by the dialogue between Janet and her doctor, and even the doctor and another nurse. But we'll get to that soon.
Yeah, that without question, that definitely comes through. And I've got a question right off top as we come in. The first scene is the nurse entering what looks like a saloon type door, right? And she comes into the room, which is odd anyway. Like, the door frame is open. I've never seen that in a hospital where there's like swinging double doors as she comes in, and then immediately turns to her right, okay? And she goes behind like a screen. So this is a big controversy. Well, I don't know how big of a controversy it is on the internet, but let me ask you this, Jimbo. Do you think this nurse is wearing the proverbial makeup because, that was one emphasis in this episode, as it becomes very apparent as you go through that the faces of the people involved in this episode are not shown until the very end of the episode. And that is done a very, awesome way. And
let me ask you a question answer your question with a question. Do you think any of the faces are in the proverbial makeup before the ending?
Yes, they are, and that's only because I have access to the research, and there were multiple actors who said that they were in the makeup. The nurses and doctors and so forth were in the makeup the entire episode. But this person in particular, this first nurse who approaches I can't remember. Janet, thank you. Miss Tyler. I was thinking of Miss Tyler. Let me just read this. Here's the controversy. I'll just try to make a distinction. And I even got kind of engrossed in this. I even took like screenshots and paused it and zoomed in on her face. And to me, it looks like she has a slight, not the full regalia of makeup, but she does have something around her mouth that it looks just slightly different. I was going to send you the pic and see what you thought, but let me just read this. Go ahead.
But don't give away the ending yet by keep talking about this makeup and stuff. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, hopefully, again, if you've come to this podcast, you've at least watched the episode once. You're not coming into this cold.
If you've ever seen the Twilight Zone, I'm sure you've seen this episode anyway. So.
Okay, so here's the controversy right off the top as we walk in. At the beginning, a nurse walks into Janet's room and her face visibly does not have the makeup-like features. This is against the norm of the fictitious world, on the contrary to the revelation that everyone has disfigured faces. The nurse in question is behind a dimly lit gauze-like screen. Periodic freeze frames and zooming in on the actress shows a vague and interrupted makeup face. I'm going to change that. The actress is indeed wearing the makeup of the normals in quotations. That would be all the doctors and nurses and the quote-unquote normals. But here, this notation is taken from the Twilight Zone, Unlocking the Door to a Television Classic. It says this about this particular episode. It says, all of the actors and actresses were required to wear the makeup at all times, even before the unraveling of the bandages. But there was apparently an exception. The opening scenes in Janet Tyler's room with the nurse before Serling's intro, which hopefully we'll get there. We're starting out pretty slow here, but we'll get there. So this is before Serling's intro. So this is speaking about the scene that we're talking about right now in the opening scene. The actors in those particular opening scenes did not have any makeup on their faces. So this is confirmed by, in the book. So so the internet's wrong. So they're saying that everyone was wearing makeup, but those closest, one Martin Grams Jr., who wrote the book about every episode, says no, there was an exception. And this nurse in particular, I think Joanna Hayes, was another exception. The nurse clerk, the secretary front desk clerk, she didn't have any makeup as well, because there was an incident that I read about where Douglas Hayes, she had come to set and she had all of her full makeup on, and he was like, why did you come in full makeup? You didn't need to wear all that makeup. And he had a funny line. He said, and the rest of the day did not go that well. He was giving an interview because his wife had spent all this time coming to the set with all the makeup when she didn't need to put it all on, because she wasn't a reveal as one of the normal people. She had a very small part. Jimbo.
Do you know how many days this took to shoot?
I do not. Please tell me.
I do not. Well, no, I don't know. I'm just asking if you might be able to say that everybody was in their makeup if it was a 1-day shoot or 2-day shoot, you know what I mean?
Right.
So they didn't, because you know how long it took to do some of that makeup stuff. But the way they did those, we'll talk about that towards the end, the way they did the normals is very interesting too.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have that in your notes later on.
I don't.
Once we get to the reveal,
I'll be interested.
Okay. Well, let me grab my my trusty sidekick companion book here, because I thought you would have it. So let me pull this out real quick.
Are you want to do this now, or you want to stand by and give that information?
No.
now?
Go ahead.
So
go ahead and keep going.
So basically, I was just wanting to confirm that the internet's wrong on that one, because I think they're wrong. I don't think she's wearing any makeup that I can tell. If she is in this opening scene, I'm sorry I'm going down a big rabbit hole, but this one, for some reason, just caught my attention, and I had to. And to say that people's faces aren't shown at all is probably factually incorrect, because there are other scenes where when the camera pans across, you can catch a glimpse of the outline of the doctors' faces, and it's not that their heads are cut off. And the directors talk about that in other trivia, that they didn't want it to be that abrupt. They wanted the audience to be drawn in, but they didn't. Mm-hmm. But the director didn't want them to be asking themselves that question throughout the whole episode, like, why aren't they showing the faces? He wanted the story, to be front and center. So they had to do it in a real strategic way where, they would show the outlines of the faces, but in certain scenes, but that it wouldn't look too obvious and get distracting.
But I think it was strategically shot to the way that they shot the film. Basically, the use of the shadows they did, like even when the one lady's like, hey, you want a cigarette? And she lays the pack down, and the other lady, just before her face comes to it goes down to get the cigarette or whatever. The one scene where the doctor and the one nurse is asking if it's going to work or what's going to happen, he turns around, and he's like obscured by her shoulder. Just a lot of the ways that they shot this, I thought it was really well done.
Yeah.
It kept me on the edge of my seat because you didn't know what was going on.
Absolutely. It was very well done. It was very strategic, and, they pulled out all the big guns for this episode, and, little tricks and all the camera work and, disguising things. Yeah, it was pretty awesome. But let's talk about the idea for this episode. Rod says this in an interview. He says, "This was one of those wild ones that I came up with while lying in bed and staring into the darkness," Serling told a reporter from TV Guide. And all of us have been there, right? Just staring at the ceiling and can't go to sleep. He says nothing precipitated it beyond the writer's instinct to what constitutes an interesting story. Also, as often is the case in the Twilight Zone, I would like to make a thematic point. The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street was a parable having to do with prejudice. Eye of the Beholder, on the other hand, made a comment on conformity. So keep that theme in your mind, the theme of conformity. No audience likes a writer's opinion thrust down their gullet as simply a tract. It has to be dramatized and made acceptably palatable within a dramatic form. This is how we designed Eye of the Beholder, and I think we were successful. And I would agree 100%, Rod, with that. It was very successful in the way it was carried out. So, kind of touching on themes back in the episode as we move along, the opening scene, of course, it's kind of a little bit jarring as we see this woman's head completely encapsulated in bandages and wrapped super tight. She can't see out of them. She's restricted to this hospital room and relying on, the nurse's care. And that's kind of our opening scene. And like Jimbo said, the light and the shadows are used very well here. The light is shined on Miss Maxine Stewart, Janet Tyler, the character. And anything else jump out at you, or any trivia you got there, Jimbo, as far as the opening scenes go?
I don't believe as far as the opening scenes so far, no.
So she has this dialogue with her nurse, and they have some opening remarks, and so the nurse goes back out to the nurse's station, and she, talks into this old-time speaker kind of thing that she talks to the doctor and gives an update on the patient's condition and no changes in temperature, and kind of gives her updates. And here we see Miss Joanna Hayes as well at the nurse's station with her back turned. And the nurse has a really gripping line in the first kind of exchange after she comes to the nurse's station. She says something to the effect like, if that were my face, I would dig a grave and, I can't remember the exact line, but it's something to that effect. Like she would bury herself alive if she had to deal with that type of face. And then after that, we get Rod's introduction. That's really cool how they transition to the introduction too. He kind of steps out in amongst all of the hospital there.
I really wish that they would have had Rod's face wrapped in bandages, or had the makeup on him or something. At the end. You know what I mean? I just think it would have put a little bit of funny spin on it.
Yeah, that would be. Let me give you a little trivia out of the Martin Graham's Jr. book, talking about avoiding the faces. The problem of how to avoid the faces of the doctors and nurses without making it too obvious with viewers that a secret was being kept from them proved to be a challenge. You could have done it all with inserts, but that would have made the audience suspicious, Douglas Hayes said in an interview with Ben Hendren. What I wanted to do was try to hold their attention and yet not let them see any faces without having the audience say, hey, something's wrong, they're not showing faces. Oh, it's important to maybe point out here too, with the two Mrs. Tylers. This is an interesting note. It said the director had planned to have Maxine Stewart, who spoke all of the lines of the main character Janet Tyler when her head was entirely covered by bandages, to dub in the single line spoken by Tyler when she is revealed to be portrayed by the actress Donna Douglas. However, Douglas had been listening to Tyler's voice as she recorded her part and was able to imitate her so successfully that she was allowed to speak the line on camera herself. So, also in other places, I don't know if I have it here or not, but when they were picking actors and actresses to play the parts of the people without the faces, they wanted Maxine Stewart's voice in particular. I might have it here somewhere in my notes. Maybe I don't. I don't know if you have it, Jimbo, but they wanted a particular type of voice, right? They wanted her her voice to be a little more gravelly, if you will, a little bit more, I don't know what the right word is, worn down, maybe. And all of the other doctors and nurses' voices, they wanted them to be like calm and soothing, and they wanted to portray them to be like really nice and inviting and helpful type voices. And so the way that they did that, the director, I think Douglas Hayes, he went into a room and he never actually looked at the actors and actresses who were, auditioning for the parts. He actually had his back turned to them and he just listened to their voices in order to see how they would fit with his vision of what he wanted their voices to sound like. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But now we're in the episode, the doctor is meeting with her now, and the nurse has kind of been dismissed. I don't know if she's in the room now or not, but again, the dialogue and the script in this is just, man, it's just outstanding. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just really great dialogue here as they have this exchange bedside. Jimbo, any
right,
trivia?
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Here we go. We're getting ready to dive into some of the heart of the episode.
Yeah.
So, Eric, this is where I posed a question to you before we started because I didn't want to put you on the spot and wanted to see if you wanted to cover this part. Mm-hmm. So, I asked you, do you think there is an underlying tone of racial inequality due to the times that this was filmed? The civil rights movement pretty much took off in 1961. Right, I did a little bit of research I didn't really dive into, but I know in January, I think in 1961, all the way through November of that year, there was the people that were eating at the all-white restaurant. There was the people getting kicked out of school. There was bus movements, and it was angering a lot of people in the South. So here's my question, or here's my observations from this talk that the doctor and Janet is having at this point. Janet uses the term segregated, and she also used the term ghetto for freaks. The doctor then responds with something about living life among normal people. And then Janet also states, well, you mean people who are different than people who are normal. So as you can see, the doctor is saying, look, you've been here 11 times now, and we've tried to fix you, but, we're just basically, you're not normal. And I think, for me, with Janet being under the bandages, I think that Rod was basically saying, in a subliminal message, roundabout way, that, hey, we've covered our eyes to the racial inequality that's going on in America. It's time to take the bandages off and treat everybody as equal. That's just an observation I had based upon what I've seen so far in this episode. Because here, I think in the next scene, when the doctor is talking to the nurse, and she's like, well, do you think it's going to work and all that? And he's like, I just don't understand. He says, I've seen her face. I've seen the real face of that lady, and it's a human face. And he said, why shouldn't people allowed to be different? And the nurse goes, you better hush up because you're going to get in trouble. You know what I mean? Right. Basically, because that's not what we, you're going to get, the wrong people are going to hear this and you're going to basically be in trouble. So I don't think it's a far stretch saying that there are racial inequalities that were brought out specifically for this movie. Even though this episode is not about racial inequality, I think you can draw from that conclusion maybe as like a side story, backstory to this.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely would agree. Those themes are definitely present, and going back to the original theme of conformity, Rod just masterfully weaves all of those things. Here's what I wrote. This is toward the end of my notes, but I'll go ahead and bring those up because you introduced those thoughts and ideas, Jimbo, is that key themes for me were racism, and I take this right out of the episode. Ms. Tyler says, congregated, you mean segregated, right? That's a line straight from the episode. I think other key themes are disability, extinction of undesirables, conformity, normal, quote-unquote quotations, normal people, beauty, where ugliness is a crime, and power, the state rules, right? The great leader on the television. Privilege is also another theme. So I think, man, he touched all the bases in this particular episode when it comes to, those topics. But let's meet the two it's Miss Tylers, if you will. Let me give you a little bit of background and trivia for them. Let's first meet Donna Douglas. She says in an interview, I was a newcomer from New York, recalled Douglas. They were looking for a woman of exceptional beauty, and they picked me. Looking back, I can express how proud... Yeah, that was a stretch, right? There's a beautiful woman. So she says, looking back, I can express how proud I was to be part of the show. It was fascinating how they put that together. The flesh-colored makeup on the nurses and doctors. They put makeup on me, too, but I don't know why, since I was supposed to be under the bandages. I don't know why they had someone different underneath the bandages. I would have done that. I guess it was the woman's voice that they were going after, but I had the same voice. So you kind of pick up a little tinge of like, man, why do they need two people? I could have done this all myself. But again, Maxine Stewart's voice is, it's very, I don't know if necessarily iconic, but she did have a long history in radio too. So her voice is, unmistakable. So let's see what Maxine Stewart has to say. She says, Ethel Wynett was a friend of mine at the time, and she hired me for any show she was involved with. So this lady Ethel must have been involved, obviously, with the Twilight Zone. And she says, she was a dear, recalled Maxine. I was the victim under the bandages who was the most beautiful woman. I always had trouble crying tears on television, such as Philco Television Playhouse, but I cried tears under the bandages. I was into the role so much. They had me come back later to loop my voice to the film, and that sound studio was MGM. I could not see anything with the bandages around my face. So the cast or someone, I can't remember, helped me move about, and I had to go to the bathroom one time, and it was embarrassing. So she was talking about she had to go to the restroom when she was in full bandage regalia, and some people had to help her get to the bathroom. So those are the two Miss Tylers. You heard from them and their experience as far as the episode goes. So moving along, again, now we're at the exchange, and this takes up a pretty large portion of the episode too, the exchange between the doctor and nurse. Now let me ask you this question. Do you think that there was, I don't know, I got this sense that the relationship between the doctor and nurse was a little bit closer. Maybe she was the head nurse. Did you kind of pick up on that a little bit? Like she's really concerned that he's not going to get too involved, emotionally with the patient, and I don't know if that's normal or not. But.
No, I just think I'm not a doctor, obviously, but I think
obviously,
if you were a doctor and you had let's say a head nurse that was always in the ER with you, always in surgery with you, she is or he, let's be honest, they are your right-hand man. They are there to make sure that you do not make mistakes. They are there to help count the tools as you are taking them out of people so you don't leave any sewn up inside of them. So they are there as basically your backup, your confidant, and you probably spend just about as much time with them as you do your own family.
Right.
So technically, they are I would say, family. It's your work family. Yeah. But I don't think I got the sense that it was like a love, like a enduring love affair, love type of situation. I think it was just mutual respect for the job that they do.
Yeah, I could have been reading a little bit more into that. There was definitely a closeness there that came through in those delivery of the lines that, like you just expressed, that they were like family. They were very close in their relationship. So that was something that stuck out to me in that scene there. So now we've moved on to the scene, the big reveal scene, right, where they start taking the bandages off, and it seems, I don't know how it was for you, but it seemed like it took forever. Like, this reveal, it really is crescendoing, to this big reveal. And they did that very well. And I was just like, man, hurry up and get these bandages off.
Do you know how they did that?
No, go ahead and tell me, because I know you got your book out here. Yeah, please.
Let me find my page in my trusty companion. Matter of fact, I might just go ahead and try to wing it if I can't find it real quick.
Okay. But it was just like, okay, so they take a little bit off, and then they stop, and the doctor asks her a few questions. Can you see? How's the light? Go ahead.
It says, Hayes recalls a particular challenge of the crucial scene when the bandages are being removed from Janet Tyler's head. While they were unwrapping her, I wanted the effect of her point of view as the layers of gauze became less and less until, little by little, she was able to see outlines of shapes and so forth. I told George Clemens what I wanted. I said, I want to have something in front of the camera so it would be from her point of view. Well, that was one of the advantages of rehearsing with the crew before we shot, because Clemens got a fishbowl and hung it in front of the camera and wrapped the fishbowl. So the lens was shooting from inside the fishbowl, and when the bandages were unwrapped over the fishbowl, you saw layer by layer beginning to get less and less until you begin to see outlines. So they used a fishbowl, wrapped the fishbowl in bandages.
Oh, did they really? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and stuck the camera inside of it so when you
I see it now as I'm on this scene. Yeah, I can kind of see how that works because, that's pretty neat.
Ain't that crazy?
Yeah. So again, boy, this takes quite a few minutes to get the full unwrapping. And the doctor, he's reassuring her, like, this is your 11th time. Well, I think he might have said that before. But he's like, if it hasn't achieved the desired result, you can't be hysterical on me. Basically, he's kind of giving her a little warning and stuff.
Right. Which is kind of funny because she's the one that's pretty much calm, and then the doctor and nurses are, no change.
Yeah, you're right. They're the first one.
And all the nurses are like, ah.
Yeah, and then we see Donna Douglas emerge, a beautiful blonde hair. She has her hands on her head, and then she looks straight up at the camera, and then they sort of push her into the corner of the room with their backs facing the camera. And then here's the big reveal. The doctor turns over his left shoulder, and he has a pig face. They're all disfigured faces, and Donna Douglas.
And they got the little Elvis lip going on.
Yeah.
Hey, baby.
Yeah. Yeah, they got the Elvis kind of lip, and then she runs into the... Now, have you met the leader? No, this is the first time we meet the leader. And
No. I do believe that they had it on the TV earlier.
Oh, right. He was. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. He was all shadowed out, and the camera was far away from, his face. Lots of flat screen. I mean, can you imagine seeing this though too? Like just like seeing flat screens, like TVs and stuff in the episode, and being a kid and be like, "Whoa, what is this? Like some kind of futuristic, new world kind of thing where everything's turned on its head, and what we see is." Everything's upside down. Like what we view as beautiful, we would view Donna Douglas as beautiful, but everything's upside down, and she's not normal, and she's considered ugly in this strange upside down world. And so there's a couple scenes of her trying to run away in the hallways and stuff, and then she bursts through what looks like a lobby, right? And she sees another one of her kind, and what was his name again? Walter Smith, right? And this dude is Mr. Handsome. He's like Mr. Universe, right? And them two are going to go off to the beauty colony together. And the doctor's kind of like reassuring her, and don't be afraid. And, Mr. Smith is not going to hurt you at all. And... yeah, I'm just blown away because like the first time I saw this has got to be one of the greatest twists in Twilight Zone history. You just are not expecting this at all.
Well, speaking of the old pig faces, do you want me to go ahead and tell you how they actually got the pig faces.
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought for sure you would have this in your notes, but I guess not. So, okay, here we go. Essential to the credibility of the piece was the makeup revealed at the climax be both repulsive and convincing. Production manager Ralph Nelson saw that. We got the time, William Tuttle recalls. Now this is something that I can't recall any of the other television productions doing. They'd come in the day before and expect a miracle for the next morning. From the beginning, Hayes and Tuttle worked together closely. As a matter of fact, said Hayes, the first problem of the makeup on that was that this is going to be too expensive. Fortunately, Hayes had experience in this area. I had started as a cartoonist at Walt Disney's and had been an art director and so on. When we did those faces for Eye of the Beholder, Tuttle had just done The Time Machine, and he had created those Morlocks. When he told me the problem as far as cost, I went down to his department and I saw some of the pieces that he had put the Morlocks together with, and I said, Bill, why can't we do something like that? Just make some pieces and paste them on. The idea was sound, and the final makeup consisted of variations of a brow piece and a large piece that covered the nose, cheeks, and upper lips. They were cast in foam rubber and attached to the actors' faces with spirit gum. To remove them, acetone was used. The physical appearance of the Uglies also involved a collaboration between Tuttle and Hayes. Doug came up with and got his fingers in the clay, Tuttle remembers. We'd modeled some things, and then he'd take a look at and offer some suggestions, and it sort of evolved from that. As for the initial concept, Tuttle explains, the idea was to make them look like pigs with the big nostrils and the pig-like nose. Hayes elaborates, the important thing about the group of people was that although they had to look slightly different, they had to conform. They had to be the same species. They couldn't all be different monsters. All in all, about 12 actors portrayed the Uglies. We didn't make masks of each one, says Tuttle, but we took 3 or 4 different ones and modeled them so they looked different. And then before they'd cast the people, we tried them on, see if one would fit one another. In other words, we didn't have to do 12 different ones. On a thing like this, the more distortion you get, the better. In the end, Hayes was glad that what they was originally planning had been too expensive. They were thinking of doing complete makeups on everything, and actually it was better not to because the individual characteristics of the actors could still show up, their cheekbones, their jawlines, their ears. Another thing is that by doing that, I was able to photograph the backs of heads and ears and things like that, which was perfectly normal. It was only frontally that they looked different. What emerged was a makeup that was horrifying, unique, and unforgettable.
Wow, that's really interesting. The amount of effort and time and thought that goes into making just those, masks, if you will, the pig masks.
Right. So technically, they didn't have to put makeup on everybody, and they only had to model. They had 12 people in it, but they only had to do 3 or 4 models, and they could use the same model just on they had to match them up to the other people's face, so that it was a lot cheaper.
Yeah, that's really impressive. I don't know where this came in under or over budget either, but wow, that's really impressive, and it makes me think of the director of American Werewolf in London. His name escapes me now, but I think I read something that he was around 15 or so at the time when he saw this episode, and he was able to replicate the mask, makeup and stuff, and I can't remember his name. You mentioned him on the episode E.T. as well. The director of American Werewolf in London. He's a famous director / makeup artist. Terrible. I can't remember his name now, but he used that in later years. He somehow perfected and was able to replicate that makeup. So iconic for sure. So here's some general trivia that probably didn't necessarily fit in anywhere in the episode, but the leader's hand movements were meant to resemble the gestures made often during speeches by Adolf Hitler. Again, another reference to Adolf Hitler.
Once again, we have another jab at Adolf Hitler. These.
We already talked about this a little bit. I'll go ahead and repeat it. The episode features 2 actors who would appear later in TV hit series. Donna Douglas as Ellie Mae Clampett in the Beverly Hillbillies in 1962, and Edson Stroll, who played Walter Smith. He played a character named Virgil Edwards in McHale's Navy in 1962. I don't know if I've ever seen maybe an episode of McHale's Navy, maybe one or two. One of the highest rated episodes of the original Twilight Zone series. That's without question. And then we already talked about the fact that no character's face was clearly shown for nearly 19 minutes, the first 19 minutes of the episode. So those are just some general trivia. Jimbo, do you have any general trivia that you would like to...
Yeah, because CBS consulted different prints over the years for syndication packages, the closing credits vary from side to side depending on what TV station is used for what version, and this made a complicated job for filmmakers. In the Twilight Zone's original DVD release, the syndicated version was marketed as an alternate version. Edson Stroll also appeared in another Twilight Zone episode later on dealing with body transformation titled The Trade-Ins, which I'm sure we'll get there, where he was the youthful body an elderly man sought to obtain. And also the famous episode is referenced in Futurama, the cartoon, Season 3, Episode 11, with a shot-for-shot recreation of the big reveal recreated when Leela's bandages are taken off.
Yeah, this has definitely been parodied. A lot. SNL with Pamela Anderson, I think they did something in the 90s. Family Guy, which I did a deep dive. I know The Simpsons parodied it. It said that Family Guy on the internet, it said that they parodied this exact episode. I can't find it. I saw an episode where they parodied The Monsters Ordeal on Maple Street, but not this particular episode. But let's hear from a fan letter. On October 25th, 1961, Lynn Anderson in San Francisco wrote to Serling explaining a commercial promoting the television program, which featured numerous close-up shots of the monsters from the Twilight Zone episode and the devil from The Howling Man and Nick of Time. The commercial was being shown at the end of children's TV programs in the morning and during a circus show very early in the evening. As a result of viewing this macabre presentation, my son has had various nightmares involving these horrible faces and is frightened in his room at night with the lights off. He says often that he's afraid of these people and describes the commercial. So the letter was forwarded to Serling from CBS, and on November 13th, 1961, he sent a reply explaining that the Twilight Zone is scheduled for 10 o'clock Friday evenings, a time frame designed for adult viewing. Without my knowledge, and certainly without my support, film clips of this program have been shown as promotional material during the daylight hours. I deeply regret this. I deeply regret that this has been the case, but unfortunately have no control whatsoever over the network's promotional planning and programming. Please accept my apologies for this, and I am sending a copy of your letter to the network here on the coast in hopes that this particular film clip will be taken out of use during the daytime hours. I thought that was pretty funny. A distraught and upset mom was having trouble with her son who was having nightmares because of commercial promos that
kind of sounds like Serling probably would have just disregarded it and made it a new Twilight Zone episode. You know what I mean? He saw something on TV.
And I found the name. His name, and he was a makeup artist. His name was Rick Baker, whose work was responsible for such movies as An American Werewolf in London in 1981 and Grey Stroke, 1984. I haven't seen Grey Stroke, but American Werewolf in London, I saw that as a kid, and it scarred me for life. I was like that kid from San Francisco. I was scared forever. I remember I saw it at a friend's house, and I'll never forget that. I was terrified after I saw that. I was way too young. He said he was influenced, this is Rick Baker, he was influenced early by the television episode, and after viewing the telecast at the age of 15, he managed to reproduce the same makeup job from this episode. Being one of the most popular episodes of the series, this episode has been referred to and spoofed by a number of television programs. We talked about that as well. Anything else, Jimbo? I think that concludes my general trivia.
Yeah, that's all the general notes I have.
All right, let's move on to questions and observations. We already talked about the key themes of conformity, racism. We kind of rolled that out at the beginning of the episode and kind of set the table for everyone as far as that goes. But I did have one question as it pertains to the episode, one thing that kind of threw me is, why isn't she allowed to go outside? I have a theory of why she can't go outside. And here's my theory, and I ask a question with another question. Is the outside symbolic of freedom? Freedom to either be different in appearance or in thought? That's my question. Because remember, she asked to go outside, and they won't let her go outside. She wants to smell the flowers. She wants to, breathe the fresh air, but they won't let her.
They won't even let her. They won't even let her look out the window or open the window. If you remember.
Interesting that.
Do you remember that?
Yeah. So it's interesting that you bring up the window, because this is an original with me, but I heard this on another podcast, and I thought this was a very interesting insight. It says the buildings, as seen from her hospital room, are very linear, and orderly, which is consistent with the theme of conformity. I didn't pick up on that, but it's true. If you go and look at the window, all those buildings, are very linear, very orderly, and that's kind of a cool little subliminal feature.
So here's my observation. I think the reason that they won't let her go outside, I think you can go ahead and chalk that back up to she's been there 11 times. They know what she looks like. They know she is different. There's no way that they are going to let her go out and enjoy the same freedoms that they have because she is different.
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to the inequality that was in America at that time.
Yeah.
You can't eat at the same restaurant. You can't go to the same bathroom.
Right.
You can't go to the same school. I think all that plays back into the part of this episode. I think the more you look at this episode, the deeper it gets.
Yeah, you could definitely mine the depths. It could go on for a while, but yeah, I just thought that might be due to it represents, the outside represents freedom to be different, either in appearance or thought, and that just kind of dovetails with what you just said, Jimbo, as far as thematically and conformity and all the things. When we wrap it all up, they just did an amazing job of wrapping it up and all those ideas and putting them right in front of you with a bow on top. But very well done. Anything else?
I just think that this is one of the greatest episodes of the Twilight Zone that you're ever going to see. Matter of fact, it might be one of the greatest television episodes in history of any television show. I think a lot can be learned from it. I think the twist in this is amazing, and I think after wearing a mask for almost a year and a half, that when we took off our mask, we all kind of look like the doctors and nurses at the end of this episode.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would echo those statements. I think we're in complete unison on this particular episode. It's outstanding. It ranks up there as one of the highest episodes, and again, it may be the highest episode in the entire series for me. It might rank up there as number one. It's hard to get any. This is really the essence of what the Twilight Zone is intended to be. It's an iconic episode. I don't think I would change a thing about it. It's just, tip tops.
I will say this: there are two episodes that probably brought me into the Twilight Zone. Now, I like some episodes more than others, but the original two that drug me into the Twilight Zone is this episode, which hooked me, and then the one with William Shatner, Flight at 20,000 Feet. Those two are the ones that I remember as a kid that I was like, wow, I love these episodes. I love the Twilight Zone. So those are the two iconic ones, and probably two of the most highest rated episodes, I think at 9.1 on IMDb, that drug me into the Twilight Zone universe. Now, with that being said, this is still one of my favorites. There has some that we've already covered in season 1 that I absolutely love now as an adult that I hadn't seen when I was a kid, which we'll find out at the very end of this when we get through all 5 seasons and we do our top 10 list of all seasons. Mm-hmm. You will find out where we place certain episodes and why. But for me, this is the essential Twilight Zone episode. If you could only have somebody watch one episode of the Twilight Zone to see if they like it or get them hooked, this would be the episode.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, I think we've rattled on long enough. For once, Eric and I actually agree on an episode. That doesn't come often, as we'll testify next week when we cover Nick of Time. So, with that being said, we'll see you next week. This episode's coming to a close, and that's a wrap.
And cut.
Now the questions that come to mind. Where is this place and when is it? What kind of world where ugliness is the norm and beauty the deviation from that norm? You want an answer? The answer is it doesn't make any difference. Because the old saying happens to be true. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. In this year or 100 years hence. On this planet or wherever there is human life, perhaps out amongst the stars, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Lesson to be learned in the Twilight Zone.